I've walked these forests. I've heard the stories. Now, I'm going to tell you 15 of them. My name is Jesse Wildfox. I'm Cherokee, raised in Robbinsville, not far from the borders of the Great Smoky Mountains. I've worked backcountry patrol for nearly 12 years now. I've seen overturned bears, hikers mauled by wildcats, flash floods, and more lost people than I care to count. But what happened to me during the fall of 2017 isn't the kind of thing they teach you how to handle at the academy. You can't prepare for it because it doesn't move like nature, doesn't feed like nature, doesn't belong here. It started with fog, thick, cold, bone-dampening fog that slid between the trees like breath from something too large to see. I was called in on a solo assignmenta, missing person report from a group out near Klingman's Dome. A solo hiker named Matthew Weller had vanished 2 days prior. According to his friends, he was experienced, had a working GPS, full gear, the works. They said he just walked off, right into a patch of fog, and didn't return. Now, fog is common here. Hell, it's in the name. The Smokies wear it like skin. But this fog, this wasn't right. It didn't move. It just sat, heavy, still, as if the world behind it had fallen asleep. I parked near the lead trailhead, packed light, just a radio, water, some emergency gear, and started in around 6 a.m. The air was cold enough to sting. The fog rolled low and thick as soon as I passed the first switchback. Visibility dropped to 20 feet. The birds stopped calling. By the 3rd mile, I'd reached the area they last saw him. I called out, "Matthew Weller, this is Park Ranger Jesse Wildfox. If you can hear me, call back." Nothing. Just the muffled sound of my own voice swallowed by the fog. No echo. Like the woods weren't woods anymore, but rooms filled with wool. I kept walking. Then I heard it. "Hey, over here." The voice was faint, distant, but I recognized the name. Jesse. It said my name. Not Ranger, not help, just Jesse. And it wasn't my voice. It sounded like Matthew's from the recordings I'd reviewed, only stretched, like it had been played underwater. I turned toward the sound and moved off trail. That's something we're never supposed to do. But I had my GPS. I marked my path. I knew I'd find my way back. At least I thought I would. The forest looked wrong, trees crooked at angles I couldn't name. Moss clung to bark like skin peeling off bone. I felt like I was walking into a place that pretended to be forest, like it had studied what a forest looked like from the inside of a cave and did its best to match it. The voice called again. "Jesse, help, it's cold." I stopped. There were no footprints. The fog was so dense it should have preserved any step, any scuff on the leaves or soil, but the ground was smooth, untouched, as if no one had passed through here in years. Still, I pressed on. I told myself it might be echo, some weird atmospheric trick. The mountain does that sometimes. Shuffles sound like a deck of warped cards. Then I smelled something. Rot, not fresh decay, not dead animal. Old rot-wet cloth, copper, mold, and something sweet underneath it all, like fruit turned to liquor in a dark basement. I called out again, this time not using his name. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, clear as someone whispering in my ear, "Don't turn around." I did. Of course I did. But there was nothing, just fog, and behind the fog, shapes that looked like trees, or maybe weren't. I backed up slow, reached for my radio. Static. No surprise. The signal cuts often back here, but this wasn't cut. It was filled with noise, not just static, breathing, clicks, like someone dragging a broken finger across the inside of the speaker. That's when I saw the shape. At first, I thought it was a deer. 4 limbs, moving slow between trees, but it wasn't walking, it was sliding. Its feet didn't break leaves, didn't bend twigs. It just moved, like a shadow cast by something you couldn't see. Then it stood, all the way up, 7 feet at least, limbs too long, like it was made of spider bones wrapped in wet canvas. And it didn't look at me. It tilted toward me, like it could hear my heartbeat echo off the fog. And then it spoke. "Help me, please. I'm cold, Jesse." The exact same words, the same voice as before. Except this time, its mouth didn't move. It opened, but the sound came from behind me. I ran. Didn't mark the path. Didn't stop to check GPS. I just ran. I think I went in circles. I saw the same log twice, though it was broken different the second time, like something had moved through it from the inside out. When I finally stumbled back onto a recognizable stretch of trail, the fog snapped back like someone pulled a curtain. Just gone. The sun was higher than it should have been. I checked my watch. Dead. Phone too. My truck was exactly where I left it, but the antenna on the dash was bent, curled inward like it had melted. Later that week, they found a torn scrap of jacket deep in the woods. DNA confirmed it was Matthew's, but there were no bones, no blood, just the jacket, folded, clean. And inside the pocket, a note written in charcoal. It said, "He sounds like me." I turned in my report. I didn't lie. I just didn't write everything. But I told my grandfather, and he said only this: "The fog is how they feed. You were lucky it hadn't learned your shape yet. There are places in these mountains where nature ends and something older begins, where the fog isn't weather, it's memory, and it wraps itself around voices like skin, dragging them forward until we can't tell if we're hearing a person or the echo of someone already gone. If you ever find yourself in a pocket of silence so thick you feel your thoughts go heavy, don't answer when someone calls your name, because it's not them, and it never was. Turn around, walk away, even if you hear someone beg, because that's how it hunts." Subscribe, like, stay safe, or ignore it and see what follows you home. My name is Samuel Clearbranch. I'm a park conservation officer, part-time wildlife tracker, and full-blooded Cherokee from the Qualla boundary. I've spent the better part of 20 years walking the Smokies. I know her moods, the way the fog hugs the hills like it's protecting a secret, the way certain winds smell different before a death. I know her bones too, the ridgelines that crack and rise like the spine of something ancient buried just beneath the moss. But there are things out here even I don't understand. Things not written in Park Service manuals or geology guides. Things only the old ones talk about, and sometimes not even them. I first heard about the grave circles from my grandfather when I was 10. He sat me down in front of the wood stove, looked me in the eye, and said, "If you ever see a patch of earth where the grass grows in a perfect ring and the trees bend inward instead of out, don't step inside. Not even a toe." He never said what was buried there, only that it wasn't for us to disturb. I'd forgotten all about that conversation until the summer of 2014. We got a report of a missing Hikera college kid named Jeremy Holt. He and his girlfriend had been backpacking east of Klingman's Dome. She came back alone, hysterical, barefoot, eyes wild, like she'd run through a nightmare. The only thing she kept saying was, "He stepped into the circle." The rangers chalked it up to panic. Delirium. Maybe he'd fallen, gotten lost, maybe even run off. But something about her words stuck with me. So when they called for volunteers to comb the ridgelines, I raised my hand. It was 3 days in when I found something strange. Not Jeremino's sign of him, but the forest had shifted. I was on a game trail along a slope, choked with laurel and pine, and the wind dropped suddenly. Not slow dropped, like someone pulled the sound out of the air. The birds went quiet. My skin prickled. Every tracker knows that feeling. Something watching, something old. Then I saw it. A circle. Not stone, not man-made. Just a clearing perfectly round, maybe 20 feet across. The forest stopped clean at the edge. Not one root crossed into the center. No leaves littered the soil. The moss was greener, too green, wet-looking, like it had just rained, but the rest of the ridge was dry. I didn't step in, I listened, and the longer I stood there, the more I could hear something. A hum, not mechanical, not natural either, like the vibration of a voice I couldn't quite hear. That night I hiked back down and drove straight to Cherokee. I didn't call it in. I went to see an elderly great-uncle Raymond. He lived in a little clapboard house at the edge of Big Cove, surrounded by jars of herbs and old tobacco bundles. He didn't blink when I told him what I found. Just poured coffee and said, "You need to take something with you if you're going back." He handed me an old pouch beaded and worn smooth. Inside were ashes and 3 strands of braided river grass. "They're not graves like you think," he said. "They're prisons, old ones, buried long before your maps, before English." I asked him what was buried there. He looked at me and said, "Not all spirits die. Some were put there to stop them from spreading. You don't step in their cage, and they don't step out." I took the pouch. I wish I'd taken his warning more seriously. The next day, I went back. The same trail, the same ridge, but this time there was fog, not the soft kind that rolls in over the trees. This fog clung low, thick, and sour-smelling, like mildew and something coppery. It was midday, but the light dimmed to twilight. I found the circle again, but it had changed. There were footprints now, dozens of them, bare feet, different sizes, all circling inward, leading to the center. Some of the prints overlapped like people had walked in and out again and again, but there were no prints leading away. In the exact middle of the circle sat something shiny. I crept closer, not inside, just to the edge, and raised my binoculars. It was a belt buckle. I recognized the design. It was the one listed on Jeremy Holt's missing person report. Then I heard my name, Sam, soft, from behind. I turned, heart in my throat. No one, just trees. Then I heard it again, but this time it came from inside the circle. "Sam, help." It was Jeremy's voice, or what I thought was Jeremy's voice. But it was wrong. Too calm, no fear in it. And it was layered like 2 voices saying the same thing a beat apart. I stepped back. The wind moved suddenly. Cold air washed over me, and the trees outside the circle leaned away. Then something crawled out of the moss. Not a person, not an animal, just a chapital, thin, wrapped in something like old cloth and shadow. I didn't see eyes, but I felt them, locked onto mine. It didn't move toward me, it just watched. Then it took another shape, Jeremy's, but not all the way, just enough to make the jaw the same, the hair, the clothes, like a bad memory being rewritten by something that never saw the original. I threw the pouch, not at it, just into the circle. The thing flinched. I swear on my mother's grave, it recoiled like the air itself had burned it. The moment the pouch hit the moss, the fog broke apart, pulled back, and the thing melted back into the ground like it had never been there. I ran, didn't report it, didn't speak for 3 days. Eventually, I told one supervisor what I found. They marked the area sensitive wildlife corridor and closed it to the public. Another lie. It's been 10 years. Every few seasons, hikers go missing in that quadrant. No signs of struggle, no gear, just gone. A few months ago, I heard from a junior ranger. Said he found a belt buckle in a moss clearing. I asked him what happened next. He said the fog rolled in and something whispered his name. He ran. Smart kid. I told him to burn cedar and never walk that ridge again. You can ignore this if you want. Write me off as a ghost storyteller. I don't care. But if you ever find a circle in the Smokies where the trees lean wrong and the birds won't sing, don't go in. Don't even look long, because something inside will look back, and it's waiting for someone to open the door again. Turn around, go home. The mountain doesn't want you there. My name is Daniel Redfern. I'm a Cherokee environmental field tech based out of Bryson City, and most of my work keeps me waist deep in rivers, water sampling, streamed surveys, tracking invasive crawfish, that kind of thing. I know Laurel Creek like the back of my hand. I've waded it in spring floods and dry autumns. I've watched salamanders mate beneath flat rocks and log temperature swings over time like a priest tracking the mood of God. But what happened in 2017 still rattles me. It took the science I was raised on and cracked it in half like a rotted limb. It started simple. We were monitoring sections of Laurel Creek for sediment buildup after a mudslide near Cades Cove. Nothing special, routine stuff. Our team had 3 people, me, a new intern named Thomas, and a hydrologist named Linda. We hiked in early September, just as the heat was fading and the leaves were hinting at fire. Our camp was upstream, just above a bend where the creek runs narrow and deep. I'd always liked that spot. Quiet, sheltered, but that week, it felt off. The water moved like always, but it sounded different, muted, like someone had pressed a pillow over its mouth. Day 1, we ran sensors velocity probes, pH meters, turbidity logs, but Thomas, the intern, kept asking if there were caves beneath the creek. I told him no, not in this stretch. Maybe some undercut banks, a few muskrat burrows, but nothing you'd call a cave. He didn't argue, just kept looking into the water like he expected something to look back. That night, I couldn't sleep. There was a strange pulsing in the ground under my tent, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I blamed the current, the hum of moving water, but I've slept beside creeks most of my adult life. This wasn't normal. Around 3 a.m., I stepped out to piss and caught Thomas standing knee-deep in the creek, shirtless, arms limp at his sides, just staring. His back was to me, and he didn't react when I called his name. I grabbed him by the arm. His skin was ice cold, and when he turned, his eyes were empty, not frightened, not calm, just gone. I walked him back to camp, wrapped him in a blanket, and sat up until sunrise. In the morning, he had no memory of it. Thought I was messing with him. That should have been enough to pack up and leave. I wish I had. Day 2, we moved downstream to log data at the creek's sharpest bend. Locals call it Devil's Hook. Water's 30 feet deep in the middle, which is odd for a mountain stream. Too narrow, too deep, and always colder than the rest. Linda dropped a temperature probe on a tether. About 5 feet down, it vanished. No splash, no resistance, just gone. The rope pulled taut in her hands, then went slack. When she reeled it in, the cable was severed clean, like it had been sliced by something too sharp to be stone. We didn't speak for a while after that, just packed the remaining gear and hiked upstream in silence. That night, it rained. Not a storm, just a steady curtain of mist that soaked the tents and filled the air with that thick, mossy rot that settles in your throat. The creek rose fast, not flash flood fast, but wrong, like the stream bed was rising, not the water. I stepped outside and saw the flow reverse. Laurel Creek, always a southbound current, now ran uphill, not fast, just a slow crawl against gravity. Stones clattered underwater like teeth chattering in sleep. I rubbed my eyes, swore it was exhaustion, but Linda came out behind me, stared, and whispered, "That's not possible." Thomas was gone. We found his boots in the mud beside the creek. No drag marks, no signs of a struggle, just 2 footprints facing the water, then nothing. The ranger station sent a chopper in the morning. No sign, no body. We filed the report, listed him as presumed drowned, and packed up camp with the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. But I didn't go home. I came back a week later, alone. I needed to know, not for answers, those don't live in the Smokies, just for something I could name. I followed Laurel Creek from its source down, walking the edge where it bends into Devil's Hook. I carried only my boots, a field journal, and a shortwave radio. I camped in the same spot. At midnight, the fog returned, but not drifting mist. This fog curled against the ground like it was searching. It moved upstream, not with the breeze, but against it. Intentional, hungry. I backed away from the water's edge, and that's when I saw it. A shape in the stream, just beneath the surface. It stretched the length of a school bus pail, ribbed like a centipede, but no legs, just folds. It pulsed once, then again, and the stream visibly lowered. The water wasn't flowing around it, it was inside it. The creek ran through it, like it was hollow, like it was part of the water. Then it opened. Not a mouth, a seam, a vertical split in the pale mass, revealing a darkness so deep it didn't reflect light. And inside that split, something looked at me, not with eyes, just presence, pressure. Then I heard Thomas. "Dan, help me." His voice, weak, from inside the thing. I don't remember pulling my knife. I don't remember stepping back. I do remember the silence that followed. The creek froze, no ripple, no splash, just stillness. Then the shape receded into the bend, folding into the current like it had never been there. The next day, I hiked out and never came back. Linda quit 2 months later. Works in desert climates now. Says she needs to see where her feet land. I told the park what I saw. They flagged the area geologically unstable and closed that stretch of trail. They drained a section of the creek bed to install a data cable last year. The diver came back pale, trembling, wouldn't speak. That cable was never installed. I keep the tether cable Linda lost. It's clean cut, still smells faintly of iron. If you ever hike Laurel Creek and the water starts to move funnier, you hear someone call your name from the stream. Don't look. Don't go near the bend. Don't listen. Because that thing isn't just in the creek. It is the creek. It wears the water like skin. It listens. It waits. And, sometimes, it calls out with a voice you trust. If your feet are wet and the forest goes quiet, get out. That current doesn't take you downstream. It takes you somewhere else. My name is Elijah Bearcoat. I'm Cherokee, raised in Swain County, and I've been a wildland firefighter and lookout for more than a decade. The Smoky Mountains are my home, my sacred place, my shield. I've walked them through drought and flame, hiked ridges where the air feels ancient, and sat for days in silence at the top of a rusted steel fire tower, waiting for storms or smoke to roll in. But there's one night I can't explain, and I've never told anyone about it, not officially. I filed the report like I was supposed to, but I didn't tell them what I really heard, or what I saw climbing toward me in the dark. It was October 2019, dry season, which is fire season in these parts. I'd been assigned to the Clingman's Crest Watchposta fire tower, built in the 1960s, barely maintained, perched on the backbone of the Smokies. It stands over 70 feet tall, bolted into a ridge high enough that, on a clear day, you can see 3 states. I was on a 6-day shift, sleeping in the tower's cabin and radioing in weather and visibility every few hours. The first 4 days were fine. Cold, dry winds, red leaves scattering across the ridgeline. I saw a few deer, heard the occasional black bear crunching through underbrush at dawn, nothing unusual. But on the 5th night, everything changed. It started around 1:15 a.m. The tower cabin creaked like always steel shifts, wood settles, wind hums, but then the wind dropped, like it does before a thunderhead rolls in. Only, the skies were clear. No clouds. No movement. That's when I heard it. A scream. Not from below. From above. It echoed down from beyond the canopy. A high, wailing, cry-not animal. Not human. Something in between. It cut through the still air like a wire through skin. I froze, thinking maybe it was wind shearing through the pines. But it came again, closer this time, louder, and layered like more than one voice, howling in unison. I stepped onto the catwalk with my flashlight and swept the sky. Nothing. No helicopters, no drones, just trees swaying beneath a full moon, and a long ribbon of clouds sliding between the stars. Then something moved, not in the trees above them. A black shape, long and vertical, dropping through the night air like it was falling. Then it caught itself, jerking unnaturally, and clung to the top branches of a spruce, maybe 40 feet from the tower. My light caught a flash of pale skin, or what looked like skin stretched over too many limbs. It didn't reflect the light. It absorbed it. The scream came again, this time from the direction of the tower's base. I ran back into the cabin and shut the hatch in the floor, bolting it from inside. My radio was on scan. Nothing. Dead air. Then the tower shook. Just once. Like something had landed against one of the lower supports. I dropped to my knees and pressed my ear to the wooden floorboards. What I heard still keeps me up at night. Climbing. Not footsteps. Not boots on metal. Claws. Steel pinging under pressure, like something long-limbed and barefoot was hauling itself up the stairs with sharp, deliberate grabs. One claw. Then another. Then a sliding noise. Then silence. Then again. Higher. I drew my sidearm and stood by the trapdoor, heart pounding in my chest. Whatever was climbing wasn't rushing. It was measuring, waiting between steps like it was, listening to me breathe. At step 37, yes, I counted. I saw the hatch flex upward, just a nudge, like fingers testing the weight of the lock. Then again, harder. A low moan came from beneath it, not pain, not effort, excitement. Something was enjoying this. Then I heard it speak. Elijah. My name. Soft. Wrong. Like someone was speaking through cracked glass. It said it again, slower, like it was practicing. Elijah. I screamed back. Who's there? But the voice only laughed, short, wheezing laugh, more air than sound. Then silence. The hatch stopped moving. The tower didn't shake. The forest went dead quiet. Not even the wind moved. I stayed frozen for what must have been 20 minutes. Then came another noise. Scratching. Along the outside walls of the tower cabin. Gentle, deliberate, long drags of claw or nail. Whatever it was had moved from the stairs to the outer beams, and it was climbing again. I crawled to the window and peeked down. It was right there, clinging to the outside of the cabin, just below the window. Its limbs were too long, jointed wrong, elbow bent backwards. One hand, or what passed for a hand, was pressed against the glass. Thin fingers splayed. Each fingertip ended in something like bone or horn. Its face god. Its face was a sloping mask of wet flesh, eyeless, with a slit for a mouth that ran sideways across the bottom. It opened just enough to exhale a wet hiss that fogged the window. Then it whispered one word. Inside. That's when the glass cracked. I bolted back to the trapdoor, unlatched it, and fired 2 rounds straight down. The sound exploded through the cabin, deafening me, and I heard a sharp scream, not of pain, but surprise. The tower shook again, hard this time, and then whatever was out there let go. I heard it fall, the scrape of claws down steel. Then nothing. I waited till sunrise, gun in hand, door locked, not sleeping. When I climbed down at dawn, there were no tracks, no claw marks, nothing but frost on the steps. But under the cabin, where the base support meets the concrete, there was something new. A line of small, charred handprints, black against the pale frost-like. Something burned, had touched the base and climbed upward. No footprints away, just the prints, as if it had melted into the tower and reassembled itself halfway up. I never saw it again. They reassigned me to a ground post after that. I didn't argue. But every year, when October rolls around and the fog settles in the high ridges, I think about that scream from above the trees, that long-limbed thing with no eyes and my name in its mouth, and I wonder if it's still climbing towers in the dark, waiting for someone to answer. So if you ever take fire watch in the Smokies, and you hear your name whispered from below, or worse, from above, don't open the hatch, don't look out the window. Just hold your breath and wait for daylight. Because something is watching from the tree line, and it never climbs alone. My name is Samuel Wolfcatcher. I'm half Cherokee, born and raised in Sevier County, Tennessee. I spent 33 years working search and rescue in the Great Smoky Mountains. Most of that time, I walked the woods on foot boots in dirt, eyes on weather, tracking missing tourists, checking trailheads, and reading signs where none should be. Most people think the danger in these mountains comes from bears or slick rocks or hypothermia. But those of us who've spent enough time off-map, who've felt the trees lean too far in and the silence stretch too long, know better. Some trails weren't meant to stay open, and some were never meant to be cut in the first place. Back in 1989, there was a trail listed as Section 22, off the northwest shoulder of Gregory Bald, tucked behind a cluster of dogwoods and an old stone chimney that nobody ever talks about. It wasn't much, about 3 miles down into a hollow and a slow bend along a creek that always smelled too metallic for a spring-fed stream. They closed it in 1993. Official reason was erosion, washed out switchbacks, unstable footing, budget cuts. But everyone in my unit knew that was a lie. We called it Witch's Step because the slope of the trail never felt right. Your legs would burn in places they shouldn't, and you'd swear the incline shifted beneath your feet like the mountain was breathing. But that wasn't why we stopped going. In the fall of '92, we lost 3 hikers down there. College kids, smart, GPS and all. They left a clean entry on the logbook at the 20-mile ranger station, then vanished. We found their packs 20 yards off the trail, stacked neatly like someone was inventorying them. Food untouched, water full, but the soil around them was covered in footprints, dozens, maybe more. Bare feet, child-sized, no tread, all walking in circles. That was the last straw. We sealed the trailhead, pulled it from public maps, rerouted the signage, and didn't talk about it again. Not officially. But I never forgot it. And in 2018, 25 years after it was shuttered, I went back. I had my reasons, mostly guilt. I'd retired that year and kept hearing this itch in the back of my brain, like a voice saying, "You left something unfinished." I couldn't let it go. So I went in quiet. No uniform, just a small pack, revolver, topo map, and my old SAR radio. Didn't expect a signal, but it felt right. The trail was still there, overgrown, yes, but not gone. Like something had kept it groomed just enough to tempt the curious. The first mile felt off. The birds didn't sing, no deer prints, no squirrel chatter, just silence and the crunch of old leaves beneath my boots. Then the fog rolled in. Not high mountain mist. This was low, crawling fog, heavy and wet like it had bones. It clung to my legs and coiled around tree trunks. I checked my GPS. Dead. Compass. Spinning. I wasn't surprised. Section 22B had always messed with gear. That's when I saw the first marker. Not an official blaze, just a circle of twine nailed into the side of a dead oak. Inside the circle were small bonesbird skulls, maybe chipmunk, arranged carefully. Symbolic, ritualistic. I should have turned around, but I kept going. Half a mile in, the trees thinned, and I came across something that wasn't there in the old trail notes. A stone well, perfectly round, moss, covered, dry, not a drop inside. But carved into the lip of the stone were Cherokee syllabary characters, worn, but still legible. "Parteen. Do not listen." That's when I heard her. A girl's voice. "Help! Help me!" Thin, broken, echoing from the woods, just off trail. I froze. My brain knew better. You don't veer off path in these woods, not alone, not in fog, not when the air smells like copper. But something pulled at my spine, like a wire in my bones. I took 2 steps into the brush and saw movement ahead, just a flicker. A girl, blonde hair, torn blue hoodie. She looked straight at me, then vanished behind a log. "Wait," I called. She didn't answer. I pushed forward and stepped straight into the circle. I didn't realize it at first. The ground dipped slightly, but the moss grew thick and even, hiding the shape. But as soon as I passed the threshold, my ears popped, like I'd climbed 0 feet in a second. The forest changed. The fog turned black, not gray. Shadows moved without wind. My breath came slower, like the air was heavier. I turned to step back. The path was gone, not overgrown, not hidden, just gone. Where the trail had been was now just more forest, the same trees, the same fog, but rearranged. Wrong. That's when I heard them. Voices, dozens, all whispering. Some said my name. Some mimicked old radio calls I'd heard years ago. Others repeated the girl's voice over and over, each version slightly distorted, like a cassette tape melting in the sun. I dropped to one knee, heart pounding, and grabbed for my radio. Static. Then, "Sam, you copy?" A voice. Male. Familiar. "Sam, it's Danny. Where are you?" Danny Mathis, my old partner. He died in 2007. Brain aneurysm. I didn't answer. The voice repeated. Louder. More urgent. Then behind me, something stepped out of the trees. It wasn't Danny. It was wearing his uniform, his boots, even his old SAR hat. But his face. No eyes, just skin, stretched smooth like wax poured over a skull, and the mouth too wide, smiling wrong, lips twitching like they'd never learned how. He stepped forward. I drew my revolver and fired, one shot, straight through the chest. The thing collapsed, but not like a body. It folded, twisted inward like wet cloth, flattening into the soil without a sound. I ran. No trail, no bearings, just instinct. The voices screamed now, all around me. Laughter, crying, mocking. One of them was my mother. Another sounded like my ex-wife, all twisted, all hungry. Then I saw the tree. A massive oak, split down the middle, glowing faintly at the center like it held fire inside. Carved into its bark, again in syllabary. Dud. End. I threw my hand onto the trunk and everything went black. When I woke up, it was morning. Clear skies, birds singing. I was lying at the edge of 20 Mile, half a mile from the original trailhead. My revolver was gone. My radio was melted. And in my palm was a small circle of twine and bone. I burned it that night. They say the trail doesn't exist anymore, that it was fully reclaimed by nature. But I know better. Some paths are cut by man. Others are invited by things older than roots and stone. If you ever come across an unmarked trail in the Smoky Zone that smells like rust and hums in your teeth, don't follow it. Not all trails lead you back. Some just keep you. My name's Ray Littlefeather. I'm Cherokee, third-generation ranger, born and raised on the edge of the Smokies. My uncle used to say that these mountains have a memory longer than any man, and if you stay quiet long enough, the land starts whispering back. After 20 years out here, I don't just believe it, I've heard it myself. It was the fall of 2016, right before the leaves turned that brilliant rust red. I'd been assigned to check up on some of the older structures tucked along the lesser-used trails maintenance cabins, fire shelters, the kinds of places hikers shouldn't be but still manage to find. One in particular had a reputation. No formal reports, just rumors passed between rangers over black coffee and long shifts. They called it Trail End Cabin, even though it wasn't on any official trail anymore. The logging roads that led to it had washed out decades ago. Supposedly built in the 1940s for fire crews, then abandoned sometime in the 70s. Just left to rot. The forest had done a damn good job reclaiming it. I hadn't been out there since my rookie year. It was a 3-mile hike in, 2 if you cut through the birch glades, and kept an eye on the old survey markers. I took my time, letting the cold settle in my bones the way it does when the season shifts. No tourists this deep. just me and the long hush of the woods. When I reached the clearing, the sun was slanting low behind the trees. Trail end looked worse than I remembered. The roof sagged, moss draped over the front like a dead animal, and the door hung loose on one hinge. The steps creaked beneath my boots as I climbed up to the porch. I kicked the door open gently. Inside, it smelled like mildew and something else, wet dirt and copper. The kind of smell you find in crawl spaces that haven't seen light in years. The furniture was gone, replaced by a thick layer of pine needles and rat droppings. My flashlight beam danced across the wall, spilling paint, old nails, scratches I couldn't explain. I made my rounds, logged the structural damage, noted that the back window was cracked inward, like something had pushed in from the outside. That's when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps from beneath the floorboards. I froze, waited, then again, tap, tap, tap. I thought maybe an animal had gotten under the cabin, a raccoon, a possum. I tapped back, just to test it. Nothing. I waited 30 seconds, then started toward the back of the cabin. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it came from directly beneath my feet. I dropped to one knee, pressed my palm to the floor. The wood was cold but not dead. I could feel vibrations, subtle, rhythmic, like breathing. My flashlight caught something near the fireplace, a small hole in the floor, no bigger than a grapefruit. At first, I thought it was just rot, but when I got closer, I saw the wood had been carved. The edges were too clean, too deliberate. Around the hole were scratch marks, dozens of them, all curved inward, like something had dug up from below. I reached into my pack, pulled out my multi-tool, and pried up the nearest floorboard. Underneath was darkness, dirt, a hollow cavity about 2 feet deep, maybe 3 across, and something else. Footprints, bare, tiny, toes splayed wide like a child's but too long, and pressed deep into the mud. There were dozens, overlapping, moving in circles, and at the center of the space was a single item, a park-issued radio, cracked, covered in dust. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen one of those old models in years. The serial number was almost rubbed off, but not quite. It matched a ranger who'd gone missing back in 2009. Her name was Erica Vaughn, mid-20s. She was out checking the same network of cabins when she disappeared. No sign of struggle, no distress call. Her last transmission had been a joke about squirrels. Then silence. We searched for 2 weeks. Dogs, choppers, nothing. Until now. I picked up the radio, turned it over. It clicked on. Static. Then, hello? A woman's voice. Weak. Hoarse. Hello, is anyone there? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the voice wasn't coming from the radio speaker. It was coming from beneath the floor. I backed up, carefully. My boots creaked on the old wood. The voice came again, louder this time. Help me, please. It's dark down here. It was Erica's voice. Perfect. The cadence, the lilt, everything. Except she'd been gone 7 years. I turned toward the door, and it slammed shut. I didn't touch it. No wind, no slope, just bam, like someone had shoved it from the outside. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged, and then came the scratching. Soft at first, then frantic, like nails on wood, circling beneath my feet. I backed toward the window, reached for my radio. Dead. Then the voice changed. It wasn't Erica anymore. It was a man. Deep, slow, unfamiliar. Don't go. The floor flexed. I swear to Godi, flexed. Like something pushed up from the crawl space hard enough to bow the planks. I ran to the door, kicked it open. Fog had swallowed the clearing. Thick, like soup. No wind, no sounds. Just that wet silence that only happens after something has stopped breathing. I ran, didn't look back. 2 miles in, I found myself on the wrong trail. Somehow I'd veered without realizing it. Trees looked off, like they'd been bent backward. That's when I heard her again. "Ray, please, help me." It came from the trees this time. Not behind, not ahead, around. Like the woods had learned my name. I didn't answer, just kept moving until the terrain looked familiar again. I didn't stop until I hit the service road and saw my truck parked in the gravel turnout. When I got back to station, I filed a report. Left out most of it. Said the cabin was unstable. Said I'd heard possible animal movement beneath the floor. I recommended sealing it up, not demo. Said it was unsafe. They listened. Put a steel grate over the crawl space and locked the door. But sometimes when I drive past that access point, I hear the calls again. Soft, from the tree line. Voices I know are dead, begging me to come back. And every year, we lose 1 or 2 hikers in that sector. No pattern, no signs of violence, no animal tracks, just gone. Like the woods swallowed them, or something beneath them pulled them down. If you ever pass by trail and cabin, and you hear knocking from below, don't answer. And if it calls your name, run. Don't look back. Don't listen. Because it knows what voice you miss the most. And it will use it to drag you beneath the floor where the air never moves and the dead still whisper. Whatever it is, it's still under there, still waiting, and it knows your name. My name is Elias Deerfield. I'm Cherokee, born and raised near Robbinsville, and I've spent more time in these mountains than I have in town. For the last 6 years, I've worked for a migratory bird tracking program through the state. Mostly data collection, GPS tagging, population counts, flight path analysis. You'd think it's boring. You'd be wrong. Crows are smart, smarter than most people give them credit for. They remember faces, they learn, they adapt. In Cherokee stories, they're tricksters and messengers. When they start acting strange, I listen. That's why I went looking when we noticed a strange dead zone forming in the western slope of the Great Smokies, right between Mount LeConte and a little unnamed ridge near Deep Creek. It started in late October. Our tracking data from the tagged crows showed a perfect arc, their migratory line, a wide swoop from the north, suddenly detouring west, over and over again, every bird, as if something invisible was planted in the middle of their path, and they all knew to avoid it. At first, we thought it was a sensor issue, maybe a GPS error, but when we sent in a drone for visual survey, something strange happened. The drone stopped transmitting about 2 minutes after entering the area. No crash, no warning, just dead, like it flew into a signal vacuum. So I decided to hike in myself. I cleared it with the office, said I was doing a hardware sweep. I didn't tell them what I really felt, that something out there was wrong in the kind of way that lives in your blood, not your brain. I packed light radio, tag reader, notebook, .38 revolver, just in case. I knew the general perimeter from the GPS lines, so I approached it slowly, from the south ridge, logging each step. The first thing I noticed wasn't the silence, it was the absence. You don't realize how constant the forest's soundscape is until it disappears. No birds, no squirrels, not even wind through the trees. It was like stepping into a photograph, still, dim, breathless. I stood on the edge of it, this invisible dome of Hushand, looked up. Normally, crows fly overhead in loose flocks. There wasn't a single one, not even a vulture or a hawk. I took a few steps in. Nothing changed at first, just the quiet. Then the air got thicker, like the humidity climbed without warning. My skin prickled. I turned on the receiver, no tags in range. Not even rabbits. It was a biological void. Still, I pressed deeper. About a quarter mile in, I found something that stopped me cold. A nest, crow nest, abandoned, perfectly intact, but the twigs were damp, not from rain, from rot, like something had drained the life from them. And lying inside the nest was a single black featherbone, white at the tip, like it had been bleached by something chemical. I bagged it. As I moved farther in, I began to notice patterns. The moss was peeling from the trees in rings. The pine needles blanketed the ground in perfect spirals, and the bark was marked. Long, vertical lines, 4 of them carved high above human reach. Too deliberate to be storm damage, too unnatural to be from animals. I radioed in. Static. I tried my sat phone. Nothing. I should have turned back. Then I heard the flutter. Just a single flap, not from above, from below, behind me. I turned fast. Nothing there. Just forest. Empty. I kept moving, slower now. Then came the whispers. At first, I thought it was my own breath, echoing weird in the humidity. But noise was layered. A voice, then another, faint, unclear, like people talking behind a closed door. I moved toward it because that's what I do. I investigate. I found the clearing. Small, perfectly round, maybe 30 feet across. In the center was a dead tree stump, hollowed out. Around it bones, tiny ones, bird bones mostly, arranged like spokes of a wheel, and hanging from the branches above strips of crow feathers, braided together with something fibrous. Not rope, something organic, maybe tendon. I felt watched. Every hair on my body stood up like electricity was near, and then I saw them. Eyes, not glowing, not red, just eyes, in the trees, watching, high up, too high, wide apart, still, blinking once, slowly. I raised my revolver. The moment I did, everything stopped. No wind, no whispers, just a sound, low and vibrating, like breath sucked through teeth. Then came the voices again. Only this time, I recognized them. My brother's voice, who died when I was 16, whispering my name. Then my mother's, who's still alive. Then mine. Elias. 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 It came from everywhere, echoed without space, layered like 1,000 mouths had memorized the name and were rehearsing it. I ran. I don't remember making the choice. My legs just moved. I tore through branches, ripped my sleeve, lost my notebook. I just wanted out. The moment I crossed the perimeter, maybe 200 yards, I fell. Just collapsed, breathing hard. The sound came back. A hawk cried above. A squirrel darted near a log. Life returned, as if the forest had exhaled. I crawled to my feet and looked back. Nothing. Just trees. But the air smelled different, like something had been disturbed, like the scent of soil before a landslide. I turned on the receiver. It buzzed alive. Tags blinked in. I was out. I didn't tell the office everything. I said there was nothing of interest. Said the GPS issue must have been terrain. But I never went back. A week later, I looked at the crow data again. The detour was growing. Their arc was widening, flaring farther west, avoiding a bigger patch. And I swear to you, the last data packet from a tagged crow that went too far in, it ended with the bird's altitude dropping sharply, then a sudden spike in heart rate and silence. No impact, no fall, just gone. And when I zoomed in on the final location, I saw the clearing. Same coordinates, same shape. Somewhere deep in that forest is a place crows won't fly, not because they're scared, because they remember. And if a creature smart as a crow knows to stay away, so should you. Never follow the silence, never chase the whispers, and never walk into a forest where nothing moves, because the things that wait in stillness don't hunt you like animals. They study you, and if you step too far, they'll make you part of the quiet too. My name is Thomas Blacktail. I'm Cherokee, born just south of Bryson City, and I used to work the old copper and coal shafts tucked deep in the Great Smoky Mountains back when there was still talk of turning the land over to tourism, long before it became a national park. I was 17 when I first went underground, and 53 when I swore I never would again. This story is why. It was the winter of 1996. I was retired, mostly. Bad hip, lungs full of dust. But I still ran the inspection circuit for the old mines. Just a fancy way of saying I was the guy who checked on places the park didn't want people to know existed. See, some shafts go too deep, past survey range, past even the old blueprints. Places where the rock doesn't act right, where echoes don't bounce back and your flashlight cuts short like the dark is chewing through it. There's one shaft we called Dead Mule Hollow, way out past Indian Creek. Got its name after a collapse in 1954 crushed a pack mule and 2 men. One of them was a friend of mine, Jacob Morris. We called him Jake. Jake was a stubborn bastard. Always wore this dumb yellow miner's hat with a feather tucked in the band. Said it kept the cave spirits away. He died 30 feet down the shaft when the wall gave out. They pulled out his body, or what was left of it, and sealed the entrance with dynamite. Park Service covered it up, said it was too unstable, marked it with red tape on the maps. I hadn't been back since, until that winter. I was doing my usual rounds when I got a radio call from the ranger station. Some hikers had found what looked like a vent hole near Indian Creek low in the ground, lined with old timbers. They wanted me to check it out. The second I heard Indian Creek, my stomach dropped. I hiked out there the next morning. Snow had fallen light, but the ground stayed bare near the opening. Steam rose off the mouth of it like something beneath was still breathing. That was the first thing wrong. The second was the smell. It wasn't sulfur, not exactly. More like wet ash and burned cloth. The smell of something that had been on fire, but not recently. I leaned close. The old timbers were still there, though warped and split with age. Carved into the top beam, faint as ghosts, was a name. J. Morris. I stared at it for a long while. The hair on my arms prickled under my coat. I should have left right then, but something in me itched like an old scab I couldn't stop picking. I pulled out my old work radio and called it in. That's when I heard it. A voice, garbled at first, then clearer. Tommy. I froze. No radio static, no wind, just my name, spoken in a slow, rasp-like breath pulled through damp cloth. Tommy, it's Jake. You there, buddy? My legs nearly gave out. It was his voice. I remembered it plain as day, from poker nights and dark tunnels and stupid jokes, shouted over drills. But this voice was wrong, slower, broken somehow, like someone trying to mimic Jake from memory but forgetting how lungs worked. I backed up. Then I heard it again. Help me, Tommy. It's dark. I should have turned and left, but I didn't. Instead, I knelt and looked inside. What I saw made no sense. The tunnel was still there, extending down past the blast line, even though we collapsed it in 54. The walls were slick, wet, and something pulsed deep down in the dark. Like the mine itself was a throat, and something inside it was breathing slow. Then came the scraping. Fingers long, sharp dragging along the stone. Not fast, deliberate, like something was crawling its way up from below. I shouted, "Jake!" The scraping stopped. Then I saw the fingers. Gray, cracked, like clay baked wrong in a kiln. 4 of them, too long, jointed backward. They curled over the lip of the shaft and gripped the timber beam. Then the head rose. It wore Jake's helmet, that same dumb yellow one, feather still tucked in the side. But the thing underneath wasn't Jake. The face was ash white, smooth, and sunken where the eyes should have been. The mouth was too wide, too flat, like it had been drawn on with a burned stick. No teeth, just black gums and a tongue that split down the middle. The helmet didn't sit on its head. It was fused there, melted into the scalp. And when it opened its mouth to speak again, Jake's voice came out. But this time, it was layered, echoing, as if 100 Jakes were stacked on top of each other, all trying to say the same thing. "Let me out, Tommy." I fell backward. My boot caught a rock, and I hit the ground hard. The thing began to crawl up, slow, patient, like it knew I wasn't going anywhere. I fumbled for my revolver, raised it with shaking hands, and fired twice. The rounds hit the beam, splintering wood. The thing flinched, then screamed not with a voice, but with air. It sucked in so hard, the trees bent inward. My ears popped, my nose bled. Then it dropped, back into the shaft, vanishing without a sound. I scrambled to my feet and ran, didn't mark the spot, didn't log the report. I just got out. The ranger who sent me out there died 3 weeks later. Car accident, they said. But I looked in his file and found something strange. A notebook entry in his handwriting, dated the day after I saw the thing. Ash, face is real. Sealed doesn't mean safe. That shaft still breathes. I've gone back once, only far enough to listen, and I heard Jake again, or whatever's left of him. Sometimes I think about the other men who died down there, the ones no one talks about, the ones with no graves. I wonder if it took them too, if it keeps them. Some things rot in the earth, some things wait, and some things change. If you're hiking near Indian Creek and you find warm air rising from cold ground, if you hear someone whisper your name from under the soldent answer, because it remembers and it's still hungry. My name is Ray Hollowbird. I've spent the last 16 years working search and rescue across the Smokies, but I was raised on the Cherokee side of the line. My grandfather taught me how to read tracks, how to listen to silence, and how to feel when something in the land wasn't quite right. I used to think those were just old lessons meant for a time that didn't exist anymore. I don't think that now. This happened in the late fall of 2015, after the leaves had burned through their color and started falling like ash. We got a report of a missing child 7-year-old boy named Daniel, who vanished from a family hike along Deep Creek. Not a dangerous trail by any means. Flat, well-marked, and close to Bryson City. They were only supposed to walk in a mile or two, take pictures of the leaves, then head back before dark. But the boy ran ahead. That's what the mother told us. He ran ahead after a crow, she said. Just around the bend, the trail curves. They lost sight of him for maybe 30 seconds. Then, he was gone. By the time they called it in, it was almost 4 p.m. Sun was already dipping behind the ridge, and fog was starting to spill in over the creek beds. The kind of thick white curtain that doesn't just cover sight, it muffles sound too, makes the woods feel blind and deaf. I was on rotation that week and got the call for first response. I packed light, my pack, GPS, thermal blanket, sidearm, grabbed my field radio, and headed up the trail by headlamp. As night fell, we found his tracks within the hour. Barely disturbed leaves, little boots heading north along the stream and then veering uphill steep, unmarked terrain. No reason for a kid to go that way unless he was chasing something. No drag marks, no blood, no signs of panic. Just a steady walk up into denser forest. That's what unsettled me. Children who get lost tend to circle. They panic, run in loops, call out. But this kid, his tracks were deliberate, straight, like he was following something that knew where it was going. I followed them alone after midnight. My partner stayed back near the fork to guide backup. The boy's trail climbed steadily toward a high ridge I knew well. Old Fire Road used to run near it, but the Park Service closed it off years ago after a rock slide. And that's when the prints stopped. Dead in a patch of pine needles, no sign of a fall, no signs of being lifted or taken. They just ended. I paused, squatted, ran my fingers through the needles. Then I noticed something strange. Right near where the last footprint landed there were indentations in the dirt, but not boot prints and not animal. They were long and narrow, 4 digits, slight webbing between them, clawed at the tips like oversized human hands, but wrong, too long, too wide, and they were going up the ridge. Not walking, climbing. Fingers had gripped the bare stone slope beyond the pine bed and scaled it straight up. And halfway up the ridge, I saw them again, glimmering faintly under moonlight. Handprints, embedded into the cold granite, too deep for flesh. The rock looked like it had been melted where they touched. And then I saw it. At the very top of the ridge, silhouetted against the thin moon, was a shape, not crouched, not moving, just perched, watching. I flicked off my headlamp, didn't breathe. It was tall, gaunt, long arms, longer than any man should have. It clutched the ridge like a spiderback hunched, knees bent at angles that made my own joints ache, just looking. I raised my radio, whispered, "I have something on the ridge. I don't think it's human." That's when it turned its head. Not slowly, not curiously, like it had already been looking at me. Its eyes burned, not glowing like a flashlight, but lit from within, like the embers of a fire buried under ash. And then I heard the voice. Help. It was Daniel's voice, the missing boy, but it didn't come from the creature's mouth. It came from behind me. I turned. Nobody there. The voice again. "Help me, mister." This time from the left, then the right, then from up the ridge again. All in the boy's voice. It wasn't mimicking him, it was using him, wearing the voice like a mask. I turned back to the ridge, and the shape was gone. Only the handprints remained. I backed away slowly, heart hammering, trying not to trip on the rocks behind me. Then something fell past me. Not hit, not dropped, fell. It was a small jacketrid with a dinosaur patch on the sleeve, still warm. Daniel's. I radioed in the coordinates, told them to bring dogs and infrared first thing at sunrise. But when we returned the next day, no tracks, no jacket, no handprints, just a ridge of bare, clean stone. We combed the area for 3 days, found nothing. Except at the top of the ridge, in a patch of flattened moss, we found something buried just under the surface. A child's plastic toy compass. It was cracked, needles spinning in circles. And just beyond that, claw marks, 4 of them, deep, wide, as if something had braced itself on the edge and leapt off. We never found Daniel, not a single bone, not a scrap of cloth. The case remains unsolved. But I know what I saw. I've worked these mountains long enough to know what doesn't belong. And this thing, it waits, high above the trees, where the fog thins and the birds don't fly. It waits for footsteps to stray. It waits for names to be called out in the dark. It waits, and then it learns your voice. So if you're ever hiking the ridgelines in the Smokies, and you see tracks that climb where no child should go, if you hear a voice calling your name from the trees, don't answer, because the moment you do, it knows exactly where you are. My name's Carter Wolf. I've been camping the Smokies since I was 15, but I didn't grow up in the park. I was raised in Knoxville, worked construction for a while, then burned out. Got tired of traffic, city noise, the weight of things that didn't matter. So when I hit 32, I grabbed my gear and started spending more time in the woods. Elkmont, especially. I don't know why I was drawn there. Maybe it was the history. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was because no one else ever stayed there after dark. If you don't know Elkmont, it's this half-forgotten ghost town in the Smokies. Back in the early 1900s, it was a logging town, then a resort colony for Knoxville's wealthy. When the national park took over, most of the cabins were abandoned. Some were demolished. A few still stand-rotting, sunken, hidden under layers of ivy and old pine needles. Tourists walk through during the day. They take pictures of broken porches and moss-covered bathtubs, but nobody camps there. Not legally, not even rangers. At least, not anymore. This happened 2 years ago, October. The weather had just turned cold enough that the bugs were gone, but the snow hadn't hit yet. I was doing a solo hike through Jake's Creek Trail and decided, against better judgment, to set up camp near the cabins. Not in them, just close enough to get wind protection from the walls. I set up around dusk, cooked a little over the fire. Wind was light, stars were out, perfect night. I remember thinking how weird it was that I felt so comfortable there, even with the buildings around me leaning like crooked teeth in the dark. That changed at 2:13 a.m. I know the time because I sat bolt upright in my sleeping bag when I heard the first whisper. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't close either. Just a voice, like a child talking to himself. Words I couldn't make out. Just a murmur. I unzipped the bag, grabbed my flashlight, and scanned the trees. That's when I saw him. There was a boy, maybe 6, maybe 7, standing near the corner of one of the cabins. No shirt, just a pair of pale blue pajama pants. Barefoot, skin bone white, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His back was turned, and he was rocking slowly, side to side. "Hey," I called out, unsure if he was real or a hallucination. He stopped, didn't turn, didn't flinch, just froze. Then he started walking slow, stiff, like he didn't quite know how his legs worked, and disappeared around the cabin corner. Now, I've seen some weird things out in the wild, but nothing like that. I grabbed my jacket, threw on my boots, and followed. By the time I rounded the corner, the kid was already halfway across the clearing, heading for the row of cabins they call Millionaire's Row. I tried to keep my light on him, but the beam kept flickering. Batteries were new too. He slipped into the last cabin at the end of the path. It was the one with the collapsed porch and boarded windows. I don't know how he opened the door. It was sealed last time I checked, but he was gone. I stepped onto the porch, careful not to fall through, and touched the handle. It turned like butter. Inside was colder than outside. My breath fogged immediately. The air was dense, heavy, like stepping into a cellar that hadn't been opened in decades. The walls inside were covered in old wallpaper, peeling in long strips. Floorboards creaked under every step. I called out, "Hey, buddy, you okay? You lost?" No answer. Then, from upstairs, came the sound of tiny footsteps. Light, deliberate. I moved slowly to the staircase, every instinct screaming at me to leave, but I didn't. I climbed. Second floor was pitch black. My flashlight barely cut through the dark. At the end of the hallway, I saw a door ajar. It creaked open with the slightest push. Inside was a bedroom. No furniture. Just an old mattress on the floor and wallpaper, stained with what looked like water damage, but the pattern was wrong, like stretched fingerprints pressed into the plaster. In the corner stood the boy, facing the wall. I took a step in. The floor groaned beneath me. He turned, and I stopped breathing. His face wasn't right. Not just pale, but empty. Where his eyes should have been were smooth hollows, not gouged out, just never there. His mouth hung open, too wide, jaw slack like a doll's. And inside, where there should have been a tongue or teeth, was just black. Not a hole, not blood, just void. He tilted his head, not like a child, but like something trying to imitate one. Then he spoke. "I'm cold," he whispered, but his mouth didn't move. The words came from behind me. I turned fast. Nothing there. When I looked back, he was gone. The room was empty. The temperature dropped again. My flashlight sputtered, then died. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut. Hard. I ran to it, yanked the knob. It wouldn't move. Panic rose in my throat. I kicked it. Nothing. I looked at the window, boarded, nailed tight. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. From under the bed. Deep. Slow. Wet. I dropped to my knees, hesitated, then shined the dying flashlight under the mattress. There were fingers. Too many. Reaching outward, slowly crawling toward me, stretching like they weren't attached to anything solid. Just hands. Moving. Seeking. I screamed. Don't remember much after that. Just slamming my shoulder into the door until it cracked, tumbling down the stairs, out into the cold night. When I turned back, the cabin was dark. silent. The door stood wide open, but now every other cabin had its doors closed, sealed, shutters drawn, like the whole place had shut itself up. I ran back to camp, threw my gear into my pack, and didn't stop moving until I hit the ranger station at dawn. Told them everything. They just nodded, didn't even write it down. One of the rangers, older guy with skin like old rope, pulled me aside after and said, "You stayed in Elkmont at night?" I nodded. He just shook his head and said, "They don't like that." When I asked who, he didn't answer, just walked away. I haven't been back to Elkmont since, and I never will, because sometimes the past doesn't rot, it waits, and some things wear the shape of what we lost to pull us closer. So if you see a boy in pajamas wandering near those broken cabins, don't follow, don't listen, and whatever you do, don't go inside. My name is Elias Standing Bear. I'm Cherokee on my father's side, born in Tennessee, raised beside rivers that don't speak unless you listen long enough. I've worked as a hydrologist for over 2 decades, chasing water like it's a living thing, which, out here in the Great Smoky Mountains, sometimes it is. In late October of 2014, the National Weather Service contracted me to investigate unusual flash flooding along a stretch of the middle prong of the Little River. Locals had reported high flow rates during calm weather, and 2 separate hikers had gone missing near the water. The rangers chalked it up to poor trail navigation and the usual autumn fog. But something felt wrong even before I set foot on the trail. I was alone for the assignment. That wasn't unusual. I've done solo backcountry hikes for years, mapping stream erosion, logging sediment levels, collecting samples. The deeper the forest, the quieter the water, the more accurate the readings. Or so I thought. The morning I arrived, the trailhead at Tremont was shrouded in thick, low-hanging mist, not fog mist, that important kind that clings low to the ground, not rising, not falling. It made everything feel closer, like walking through wool. By midday, I was nearly 5 miles in, beyond the marked paths, where the river forked near an old mossy split in the stone that looked like a wound. My map showed no name for the place, just a faded contour and a sharp bend in the river. The air here felt thicker, still. I set camp near the bank and began calibrating my instruments. The first thing I noticed was the flow meter. It kept blinking a negative value. Negative. Water doesn't flow backward, not on its own, but according to my equipment, the current was moving upstream, not rapidly, but steady. I removed the sensor, recalibrated, even walked 50 yards downstream to check again. Same result. The water was flowing in reverse, just enough to ripple against the moss on the rocks the wrong way. I stared at it for a long time. Something about it made my skin crawl. I heard the first scream just after sundown. It came from upstream. One sharp, desperate sound that echoed strangely against the gorge walls, then vanished. I waited, thinking it might have been an animal, but it came again clearer this time. A voice, a man's voice, then silence. I called out. No answer. The air swallowed my words. By nightfall, the forest had gone utterly still. Not quiet still, no bugs, no wind, no rustle of leaf or branch. The trees stood like stone. Even the river, despite its wrong-way flow, made no sound. Just that slow, reverse hiss of water slinking where it shouldn't go. I tried to sleep, but every few minutes, I heard movement along the banks like footsteps that stopped when I sat up, always just outside the reach of my lantern. Once, I saw a silhouette across the river, thin, hunched, watching. It didn't move, even after I shined my light on it. I blinked, and it was gone. Around 2 a.m., I heard the river hiss louder. Not rush hiss, like boiling water inside a pipe. The mist thickened. My tent zipper rattled on its own, though there was no breeze. Then came the voices. They didn't call out. They whispered, low and steady, just above the noise of the water. Names, sentences that didn't make sense. One of them said, My sister's name. She died in 2009. Another voice muttered, coordinates I had only logged in a private notebook. I stepped outside with my flashlight and saw something that made my legs lock. The river had stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. A still, perfect surface stretched across the bend, flat as a mirror. But beneath it, I saw something shift. Not a fish, not a rock. Something large, wide, rolling just beneath the surface like a whale passing under ice. The reflection in the water didn't match what was above it. Trees bent the wrong way. The moon showed a different phase. My own face stared back at me, but it was smiling. I stumbled backward. The instant my boot hit the ground behind me, the river surged back, this time in full reverse, water roaring upstream like a dam had burst beneath the mountain. I scrambled to higher ground and watched as the current ripped across the bank where I just stood. Trees leaned, roots twisted, and above the roar, I heard screaming again, but it wasn't one person this time. It was dozens. I saw no one, just heard them, shouting, pleading, then silence again. By dawn, the river was calm, flowing normally like nothing had happened. But the camp was gone. My tent, my equipment, even my pack swept away. Only the flow meter remained, jammed into a tree root 10 feet above the waterline. I hiked back with only what I had in my coat pockets. No food, no radio, no proof. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, when I reported my findings, they dismissed the flow reversal as faulty readings and panic. But a week after I left, a group of hikers went missing near the same bend. Search and rescue found no tracks, no gear, just one thing: a canoe resting perfectly still in the center of the river, upside down. The odd part? The river was too shallow to float anything there, and it hadn't rained since I left. The canoe had no scratches, no dents, and inside, tucked neatly beneath the crossbeam, was my lost notebook dry. Every page had been rewritten, not in my handwriting, just one sentence over and over again. The river remembers what we forget. Now, I don't go near Laurel Creek. I won't even cross a bridge if the water below moves too quiet. I don't trust the silence anymore, because whatever lives under that river isn't a current or a spring or some buried cave system. It's watching, and sometimes it flows backward to find you. Whatever you do, don't listen to the voices when the river runs the wrong way, and never, ever step into the water when it's too still. My name is Luke Standing Deer. I'm not a ranger, not a hunter, not even a full-time backcountry man. I'm just a history teacher at a small public school near Bryson City. But I've always had an interest in the old stories, the ones they didn't write in the books. My grandfather used to say the Smoky Mountains weren't just ancient, they were aware, and some places in the hills weren't made for the living to walk through. In October of 2022, I made the mistake of ignoring that. I'd spent years digging through local archives, Cherokee oral traditions, and county death records. I was trying to map out lost cemeteries, forgotten plots where settlers, Civil War deserters, and even some of our own were buried without proper markers. Most were overgrown or washed away, but I kept seeing references to one particular site. Locals just called it the Pines, not for the trees but for the sound the wind made there, like the forest itself was breathing through teeth. It was always described the same way. West of Deep Creek, somewhere off a logging road that no longer appeared on maps. Nobody ever gave coordinates, just a general direction, a few stories, and one warning: don't go at dusk. But I went anyway. I borrowed a friend's ATV and packed light, just a canvas map, an EMF recorder I used for fun, and my voice recorder, which I brought to narrate notes. It was cool, foggy, just after the first hard frost. The trees dripped with melted hoarfrost, and the whole forest floor felt like it was holding its breath. After about an hour of riding and another 30 minutes on foot, I found it. The trees parted in a way that didn't feel natural. They bowed inward, not outward. like they were leaning in to see what was about to happen. And in the middle of the grove was a flat, oblong clearing, carpeted in moss. No headstones, no crosses, but I saw them, the grave markers. Not with my eyes at first, I felt them. Circles, dozens of faint, sunken depressions in the earth, each no more than 3 feet wide. Perfect rings, as if the soil itself had been scooped and then slowly settled. When I stepped into the clearing, everything went quiet. The birds, the distant rustle, even the sound of my own boots faded into nothing. I crouched near one of the grave circles and turned on my recorder. October 17th, 5:40, 6 p.m. I've located the site. The tape clicked off. I checked the batteries. Fresh. Tried again. Nothing. Then I felt it. A breeze. Not cold. Wet. Like a damp breath across the back of my neck. I turned quickly, expecting to see another hiker. Nothing. Just trees and mist. But when I looked down, there was a new ring in the moss. One I hadn't seen before, right behind me. I backed away, suddenly very aware of how dim the light was getting. The sun was falling fast behind the ridgeline, and the clearing was turning blue and gray. I started narrating into my phone instead, pacing around the perimeter, trying not to step on the circles. Then I heard the whisper. It didn't come from one place. It came from every tree, every branch, like dozens of voices speaking just out of range of comprehension. A wet, muttering sound. Words I couldn't understand, like old Cherokee mixed with something more ancient. I spoke out loud, instinctively. "Who's there?" The whispering stopped, and then a voice answered. Not in the trees, right behind me. "Luke." I turned so fast I lost my balance and fell backward into one of the grave circles. My shoulder hit cold earth. The moss gave way beneath me like old fabric, and for a moment I swear I wasn't touching the ground. It was soft, breathing, like the dirt below had a heartbeat. I scrambled out, gasping, and heard another whisper, clearer this time. "You called." I backed away fast, heart hammering in my ears. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe part of me wanted to understand. Maybe part of me still thought I was in control. But then I saw them. Figures. Not walking in. Rising. Pale shapes like mist, but with weight. You could see their footprints sinking into the moss. Each one stood inside a grave circle, slowly becoming more solid. Faces blurred, as if underwater. Some wore old pioneer coats. Others had long hair and war paint. One, God help me, had no face at all. Just a smooth slab of skin where eyes and mouth should be. I turned and ran. The trees were wrong. Paths that had been there when I came in were gone. Branches angled inward, thorns raking across my jacket, turning me back toward the clearing no matter how I twisted. My GPS blinked nonsense. My phone was dead. Then I heard the names, whispered all around me, names I recognized. My mother, my grandfather, my own. "Luke, come back." I covered my ears and stumbled through the underbrush, blind, until I saw at the edge of the clearing. But something was standing there. A woman, thin, dressed in a funeral gown, soaked to her knees in mud. Her eyes were pits of black shadow, and her mouth hung open as if in silent scream. From her chest hung a string of copper dog tags. They clinked once, twice. Then she said, in my voice, "It's okay. You're already in the circle." I don't know how I got out. I remember clawing my way up a slope, finding my ATV tipped on its side, soaked in condensation. The forest light had changed. It was morning, but I swear I hadn't been gone an hour. I'd been gone all night. They said I probably fell and hit my head, hallucinated. But the audio from my phone had one clip left, one I don't remember recording. It was me, breathing hard, then whispering, "They're not buried. They're standing, always standing, just under the moss. I won't go back. I've never found that clearing again. Every time I try, the trail disappears, but I still hear the names at night. I still feel the breath on my neck. And sometimes, when I walk near old pine groves, I swear I see circular depressions in the earth. So if you're hiking in the Smokies and the forest suddenly goes too quiet, if you find yourself surrounded by trees that lean inward and the moss feels warmer than it should do, not step into the circle. Whatever lies beneath that soil is listening, and it wants to be remembered. My name is David Locust, and I used to guide cave tours out near the Tennessee side of the Great Smokies. Used to. After what happened in September of 2019, I'll never set foot underground again. It started when I was contacted by an old friend, Riley Brenner, who ran the backcountry cave registry for the U.S. Geological Survey. Riley wasn't the type to get rattled, but he left me a voicemail one night that I still haven't deleted. His voice was tight, breathless, not scared exactly, just uncertain in a way I'd never heard from him before. "David," he said, "we've picked up something weird near Meg's Falls. A limestone fault opened behind the cascade, probably erosion. Thing is, there's a constant frequency echoing from inside it. Real high-pitched. Not wind, not seismic. You've got to come hear it for yourself." The next morning, I met him at the old service road that cuts through to the more remote side of Meigs. With him were two other folks, Natalie, a PhD student from the University of Georgia who specialized in underground acoustics, and a caver named Donnie who used to work with me a few seasons back. We geared up with helmets, rope, and basic vertical kits, assuming the cave was shallow. The waterfall was roaring that day. Sunlight caught the mist and painted rainbows across the trees. You'd never guess something awful was waiting behind it. We waded through the shallow edge of the falls and found the opening hidden behind a wall of hanging moss and slick rock. It wasn't much wider than a manhole cover, but the walls inside had been polished by water, smoothed by time. The opening dipped steep, then leveled off maybe 20 feet in, and then we heard it. The scream. Only, it wasn't a scream in the usual sense. It was this piercing, crystalline whine like metal wires stretched too tight, vibrating so high you could feel it in your teeth. I stopped instantly, halfway into the crawl. "Is that wind?" I asked. "No wind's that constant," Riley muttered. "It's coming through the stone." We crawled deeper. The cave was tight at first, just enough for a single body to slide through. Then, it opened into a low chamber, the size of a small room, its ceiling slick with condensation. Water dripped somewhere, but you couldn't hear it over the constant ringing. I clicked on my decibel meter. It maxed out at 84 decibels. That's loud enough to damage your hearing over time, and yet the scream never hurt. It just sank into your bones. Natalie was already setting up her frequency analyzer. "It's not environmental," she said. "It's not machinery. It's patterned." "Patterned?" I asked. "Repeating, almost rhythmic, like something's communicating." We should have left right then, but Donnie was already shimmying into the next passage, eager as always. "There's a slope this way," he called, "and another chamber bigger. Real quiet back here." He was wrong. The moment I followed him into that second chamber, the scream intensified. It wasn't a frequency anymore. It was a voice. Hundreds of voices maybe, screaming in unison, wailing, not words, just this endless chorus of pain. And it wasn't bouncing off the walls. It was coming from them. Riley froze beside me. "We need to go." But Natalie was transfixed. She'd knelt beside one of the cave walls, her hand pressed against it like she could feel a heartbeat. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "I hear a wall full of screaming dead people, Nat." Donnie snapped. "Let's go." But she didn't move, and neither did the rest of us for a few minutes. It was like our brains were stuck, like the sound dulled your will to run. Every part of me was screaming inside, but my legs stayed still. Then Riley stumbled forward and slapped Natalie's hand off the wall. That broke the spell. She gasped, as if coming up for air. Her nose was bleeding. "Up. Now," I said. We started backing out. That's when the walls pulsed. I swear to you, the stone flexed. Not like an earthquake, not like a shift in the rock. It moved, like lungs, like something behind the wall was pressing against it. Then the sound changed. It focused. My name echoed through the chamber, not shouted, not whispered. Spoken. David. We bolted. Donnie went first, hauling himself through the low passage. Riley followed, then Natalie. I was last. But just as I reached the crawl space, something moved at the edge of the chamber. A shape. Humanoid, but bent the wrong way. Its limbs were long, pale, wet like it had been soaking inside the limestone. Its head tilted too far, neck cracking like wood under stress. Then it opened its mouth, and the scream got louder. I dove into the passage, scraping my shoulder raw on the rock. I didn't care. I just crawled. Behind me, the scream was chasing like it was alive, funneling through the stone, focused entirely on me. I emerged out into daylight, heart hammering, breath coming in ragged sobs. Riley was vomiting. Donnie was pale as a sheet. Natalie was crying. None of us spoke for a long time. Back at the ranger station, we turned in our report. Seismic anomaly, unsafe terrain, potential cave, in risk. But privately, we all agreed no one would talk about what we saw or what we heard. A few days later, I tried calling Riley. No answer. Then I called Natalie. She picked up, but her voice was strange, distant. I asked how she was. She said, "They're still speaking," and hung up. Donnie left town a week later, quit caving, sold his gear. Then Riley went missing. His body was never found. But 2 weeks after he vanished, a hiker called in a report from near Meigs Falls. They heard a scream coming from behind the water, said it sounded like someone was trapped. Search and rescue investigated. They found no sign of a cave. None, like the rock had closed behind us. Now sometimes, late at night, I still hear that sound in my ears. Not a memory, a real echo. And sometimes, in moments of silence, when everything else is still, I hear my name again. I've tried to forget, but the cave doesn't let you go. It clings to your bones. So if you're hiking near a waterfall and hear something behind it, don't listen, don't investigate, and never, ever put your hand on the stone, because some caves weren't carved by water. They were shaped by something else. And once you hear it scream, it never stops. My name is Damon Clausen. I've guided backcountry hikes through the Smokies for over 16 years. I was born on the Tennessee side, raised by a grandmother who taught me to read moss like a compass and listen to trees like they were speaking. She never used the term haunted, but I remember her telling me once, some land never forgot what it saw. I didn't understand it then. I do now. This happened in late October, 2017, my last paid trip before winter shut everything down. A simple 2-night loop around Thunderhead Mountain. I'd done it 100 times before. Easy terrain, quiet, picturesque. Good way for out-of-towners to get their Appalachian fix and check something off their bucket list. My 2 clients were a couple from Minnesota, Amanda, and her brother Will. She was tough, funny, sharp. He was quiet, maybe 21 or 22, more interested in taking Polaroids than in walking. They'd never been camping before, which made me nervous, but they were good people, respectful of the land. That goes a long way with me. The first day was uneventful. Clear skies, mild temps. We hiked 6 miles in, made camp near a small ridge clearing I've used for years. It's not on any official map, but it's well protected from wind and has a nearby creek. I've always called it Birch Hollow, for the 5 white birch trees that grow in a perfect semicircle around it like guardians. We pitched 2 tents mine, and there set a small fire, ate freeze-dried stew, and talked about bears and ghosts and all the usual trail talk. Around midnight, the wind picked up, soft at first, then harder. It wasn't unusual. The Smokies whisper at night, But this wasn't whispering. It sounded like breathing. Deep, measured, as if the trees themselves had lungs and were testing the air for something new. Amanda asked if it was normal. I said yes. I shouldn't have. We turned in around 1:00 a.m. The last thing I remember was the faint sound of snapping twigs in the woods behind my tent. I told myself it was a raccoon. I woke up at sunrise to silence. Not quiet silence. No bird song. No leaves rustling. No insect buzz. Just a vast emptiness that made my skin crawl. I unzipped my tent and stepped outside barefoot, expecting to see Will boiling water or Amanda tying her boots. But there was nothing. No tents, no fire ring, no packs, no footprints leading out of the hollow, except mine. I spun in place. The clearing was completely empty. But here's the thing. My boots were still outside my tent, and my tent was still staked into the earth. It hadn't moved an inch, and the ground around me covered in footprints. 3 sets. Mine, Amanda's, and Will's. I could trace them in the soft detour path into camp, the way we walked around the fire, even a spot where Will knelt to photograph the birch trees. But where the tents had been, nothing. No impressions, no signs of weight, just clean, undisturbed soil, as if nothing had ever touched it. I called their names. No answer. I checked my pack. Still there. Compass, knife, radio. The GPS was frozen dead screen. It had full battery the night before. I hiked the perimeter. Called again. Nothing. Then I saw something behind the trees. Something that hadn't been there the day before. Another path. Not a trail, exactly. Just a line of broken twigs and matted leaves running straight through the forest, as if something large had moved through without lifting its feet. I crouched and examined it closer. It wasn't random. The disturbance was too clean, too deliberate, and scattered along the edge of it were tiny, round depressions. Not boot prints, not paws. Toes. Bare human toes. Too small for Will, too wide for Amanda. And there were dozens of them, pressed side by side like a group had passed in a line. The tracks disappeared about 20 feet in, swallowed by moss. That's when I heard my name. Not shouted, just spoken. Damon. I turned. Nobody was there. The voice wasn't theirs. It was lower, flat, like it had been practicing my name and still hadn't figured out where the syllables belonged. I ran back to the hollow and started packing. I wasn't going to wait for it to call again. But before I left, I walked to the center of the semicircle, the middle of the birch trees. And there, half buried in the dirt, was Will's camera. Not broken, not scratched. Just sitting there, lens pointed at the trees. I didn't touch it. Not then. I made it back to the ranger outpost by mid-afternoon. I filed a report. Search and rescue launched a full effort the next morning. Helicopters, drones, bloodhounds. They found nothing. No gear, no tracks, no Amanda, no Will. Just me, the GPS logs, and the footprints I'd photographed with my phone before I left. 2 days later, I opened the camera. It had one photo left. Just one. It was a picture of Amanda, standing in front of the fire pit, smiling. Behind her, out of focus, something was moving between the birch trees. Long, pale, bent at the middle like it didn't know how knees worked. Its head was turned, not twisted, just turned entirely too far, so the face was almost backward. And where its eyes should have been, there were holes. Not empty sockets. Holes that tunneled back into its skull like caves. I turned the photo over. There was a message written on the back in smeared ash. You never left. I threw the camera into a river that afternoon, and for weeks after, I couldn't sleep. Because every time I closed my eyes, I'd wake up sweating with the image of the hollow empty, quietened, my footprints walking in circles around the fire ring. I don't guide anymore. I don't camp. And I don't walk near birch trees, especially when the wind sounds like breathing. So if you wake up in a clearing where your camp should be but everything's vanished, and only the footprints remained, don't wait. Don't scream. And whatever you do, don't turn around if you hear your name in someone else's voice, because something out there waits for you to forget where you were. And when you do, you were never there.
My name is Dr. Elise Blackfeather. I'm a field botanist and Cherokee, born in Robbinsville, North Carolina. I've spent my life studying forests that whisper more than they speak. To me, a tree is a witness. Roots remember, bark tells the story. And if you're patient enough, quiet enough, sometimes the land will let you listen. But in the fall of 2019, I found a place that didn't want to be listened to. I'd been assigned to a seasonal research grant funded by the Department of Agriculture to study blight resistance in native oak species across the Great Smoky Mountains. Most of my work was done near the higher elevations places that tourists never see. Cool, shaded slopes where the forest grows too dense for sunlight and old trees lean into each other like they're sharing secrets. My team had broken into pairs to divide the territory, but that morning I was alone. My partner, Jacob, was off tagging saplings on the North Ridge, and I took the South Ravinia place marked on my map as Unverified Growth Cluster. It wasn't on any of our updated trail maps, just a hand-drawn red circle with a note scribbled in the margins. Old grove. Avoid during fog. Unstable canopy. I should have listened to that note. But science doesn't wait for clear skies. It had rained the night before, and the trail was thick with runoff and scattered bark. I carried my sample kit gloves, sterile tubes, a pH meter, and a custom scalpel I kept strapped to my belt. It was standard stuff. I didn't expect anything weird. By mid-morning, I was deep in a part of the forest I didn't recognize. It was darker here, not just because of the tree cover, but because something felt off. The air wasn't moving, the leaves weren't rustling. It was like I'd walked into a sealed jar. The fog hadn't rolled in, but the light was diffused as if the sun had forgotten this place existed. And then I saw it, the tree. It wasn't the tallest or the widest, just wrong. It stood in the center of a slight dip in the terrain, surrounded by scattered underbrush and dry needles. Its bark was smooth but dark, almost black. Not rot, not fire damage. Something else. The texture looked like old leather pulled too tight. But what caught my eye was the gash. Right across the trunk, waist high, clean, sharp, like a blade had been drawn across it. And from it, something was leaking. I thought it was sap at first, maybe dark resin, but as I stepped closer, I smelled it. Copper, thick and metallic. Blood. It was bleeding, not oozing, bleeding. Dark, viscous fluid trickled from the wound in a slow, steady line, pooling in the soil beneath it. I crouched beside it, gloved up, and touched the bark around the wound. Warm, not sun warm, body warm. My stomach tightened, but I reminded myself of my job. Document first, react second. I dipped a sterile swab into the fluid and sealed it in a vial. Then I took a small core sample from the outer bark and bagged it. I never touched the wound directly. Not then. I started cataloging the surrounding area, measuring canopy density, taking soil pH sample sand. That's when I realized the silence had grown deeper. There were no insects, no birds. Not even the sound of my own breath seemed to echo properly. I glanced back toward the tree, and the bleeding had stopped. But now, there were handprints on the bark. Faint, smudged, as if someone with wet fingers had pressed their palms against it, dragged them downward. They hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I backed away, slowly, eyes on the tree line. That was when I heard it. A heartbeat, not mine, not imagined. The forest was pulsing. The trees swayed, but there was no wind. The soil felt soft beneath my boots, like something just under the surface was shifting. I grabbed my kit and turned to leave, but I couldn't find the trail. The slope I'd come down was gone, replaced by a steep incline littered with unfamiliar root systems, gnarled and twisted like bones reaching out of the earth. No path, no markers. I radioed Jacob. Static. Tried again. Still static. Then, behind me, the forest exhaled. A warm gust of air pushed across my neck, like something huge had breathed out behind me. I spun. The tree, the gash in its trunk had widened. Now it looked less like a wound and more like a mouth, and something was moving inside it. I didn't wait. I ran, crashing through the brush, snapping twigs and branches, breath burning in my chest. I don't know how long I ran, minutes, maybe longer, but eventually, the light began to return. Birdsong returned. My GPS beeped back to life, and the trail reappeared. When I reached base camp, Jacob took one look at me and froze. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. I said nothing. I went straight to my kit, unzipped it, and pulled out the sample vials. They were empty. Every vial, every bag, every labeled tube, empty. Even the gloves I'd used were dry clean, like I'd never touched anything at all. But there was one thing left, tucked into the bottom of my case, folded neatly like a note. It was a strip of bark, curled, still warm, and it smelled like blood. I left the grant project the next day. I never filed my notes, never mentioned the tree, but a few weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail no return address. Inside was a single photo. It was me, kneeling beside that tree, scalpel in hand, but it wasn't from my camera. And behind me, in the shadows, something tall and faceless was standing with its hand against the tree's trunk, bleeding, not the tree it. I burned the photo. I moved to Asheville, took a position cataloging ferns. I've never gone back to that part of the forest, because whatever that tree was, it's not alone. And I don't think it bled to warn me. I think it bled because it wanted me to see it. If you're ever in the deep woods and the trees stop whispering, and the air grows warm when it shouldn't, turn back. Don't touch anything that seems too still. And if you find a wound in the bark that feels like it's watching you run, because some things in those woods don't grow, they wait. And if you give them your attention, they'll make sure you don't leave. Not as you, not whole, not ever again.